A faded easel, a canvas hidden beneath a threadbare cloth. In the corner of Mira Chen's modest apartment, her greatest masterpiece sits unseen for 15 years. Tonight, at the Whitmore Gallery's exclusive showcase, the art world's elite will mock her presence until the cloth comes off and everything changes. Before we dive into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Crisp white cardstock embossed with gold lettering that caught the afternoon light streaming through Mira's apartment window. Whitmore Gallery Annual Showcase. Special guest, renowned critic Victor Harlow. Mira. Chen's fingers trembled as she traced the raised letters. At 43, she'd spent decades cleaning the spaces where art lived instead of creating it. Her uniform, grey maintenance coveralls with Whitmore stitched above the pocket, hung by the door, a daily reminder of her place in that world. They only invited the janitorial staff because Mrs. Whitmore's guilty conscience, her co-worker, Dahlia had said with a shrug, might as well go for the free champagne. But Mira saw something else, an opportunity. After 15 years of silence, watching others create while she merely maintained, perhaps it was time. Her studio, if one could call the corner of her efficiency apartment that, contained only the essentials. A wooden easel, worn smooth from years of use, tubes of paint, some cracked with age, and beneath a cloth the canvas she'd never shown anyone, the culmination of techniques she'd studied in secret during lunch breaks and after closing hours. "Just once," she whispered to the hidden painting. "Just once I want them to see." The night of the showcase, Mira arrived early, her painting carefully wrapped and tucked under her arm. She wore her best outfit, a simple black dress she'd altered, herself paired with her only decent shoes. Her dark hair, usually pulled back for work, fell in waves around her shoulders. The gallery transformed at night. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors she'd polished countless times. Waiters in pristine uniforms carried trays of champagne through crowds of San Francisco's elite. Artists, collectors, and critics congregated in tight circles of influence and wealth. Mira stood apart, clutching her wrapped canvas, watching. "Chen!" The booming voice belonged to Douglas Whitmore, the gallery owner's son. His tailored suit probably cost more than 3 months of her salary. "You clean up nice. Didn't expect to see you here." "I was invited," she said quietly. Douglas laughed, clapping her shoulder. Of course. Mother's democratic spirit extends to all. Enjoying yourself? The champagne is excellent. Actually, I brought—" "If you'll excuse me," he interrupted, already scanning the room over her head. "I need to catch Harlow before Marianne from the Modern gets her claws in him." He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Mira invisible once more. She drifted toward the exhibition area, where several open spots remained for the showcase submissions. Each registered artist had a designated space, complete with proper lighting and a small placard. Mira found a vacant spot near the back wall and carefully unwrapped her canvas. A throat cleared behind her. "I don't believe that space is yours." Mira turned to find Eliza Whitmore, Douglas's mother and the gallery's owner. At 70, she remained imposing, silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, eyes sharp as she assessed Mira. "Ms. Whitmore," Mira nodded. "I thought, since I was invited—" "For attendance, dear. The exhibition spaces are reserved for our registered artists." Eliza's smile remained perfectly pleasant. "Though it's charming that you've taken up painting as a hobby." Mira's cheeks burned. "I understand. Perhaps you could take it to the storage room. You know where that is?" "Of course." Eliza gestured vaguely toward the back hallway, the one Mira cleaned daily. "We wouldn't want it damaged in all this commotion." Mira rewrapped her painting with careful, methodical movements, acutely aware of curious glances from nearby guests. She carried it toward the storage area, familiar territory where art waited to be displayed or shipped, where her own work would remain unseen. "What's that you've got there?" The voice belonged to Rita Gallo, one of the gallery's most successful artists. Her abstract expressionist pieces commanded six-figure sums, and her opinion carried weight in every major museum on the West Coast. "Nothing important," Mira answered, attempting to move past. Rita blocked her path. Nonsense. You're carrying it like it's made of glass. Her bracelets clinked as she reached for the wrapped canvas. Let me see. It's just a hobby piece, Mira echoed Eliza's dismissal. Not worth your time. I'll decide what's worth my time. Rita's voice carried, drawing attention from nearby guests. Come on, don't be shy. Everyone starts somewhere. Mira hesitated, then slowly unwrapped just enough for Rita to glimpse the edge. The artist's eyebrows shot up, her mouth forming a small O of surprise. Did you paint this? She asked, voice suddenly lower. Mira nodded. Rita rewrapped it quickly. Put this back wherever you were keeping it safe. Don't show anyone else tonight. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Listen to me, Rita interrupted. Victor Harlow is doing a special feature next month on undiscovered talent. This isn't the venue. His gallery is. I'll make a call. Before Mira could respond, Rita disappeared into the crowd, leaving her clutching her painting in bewilderment. Eliza's voice cut through the murmur of the gathering crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for tonight's presentations. Mira quickly returned to the storage room, placing her painting carefully against the wall. As she turned to leave, Douglas entered, accompanied by a tall man with steel grey hair and critical eyes. Victor Harlow himself. Storage issue? Douglas asked, barely glancing at her. Just finishing up, Mira replied. While you're here, Douglas continued, would you mind bringing out the Jacobson sculpture, the small bronze? Mr. Harlow was asking about it. Victor Harlow's gaze flicked over her, dismissive. The maintenance staff handles the art. Interesting. Practice? Mira's very careful, Douglas assured him. Been with us for what, 12 years? 15, she corrected quietly. There you go. Practically family. Douglas turned away. The Jacobson, please. We'll be in the main gallery. They left, and Mira stood alone among wrapped treasures and climate-controlled cabinets. The Jacobson piece was indeed beautiful, a small bronze figure, fluid and dynamic. As she carefully lifted it from its protective case, something in her broke. She had spent 15 years handling other people's art, protecting it, cleaning around it, watching others celebrate it. Tonight would be different. Mira returned to the main gallery carrying both the Jacobson sculpture and her own wrapped canvas. The presentations had begun, with Eliza introducing each featured artist. The crowd applauded, politely as each spoke briefly about their inspiration and technique. And finally, Eliza announced, we have a special treat. Victor Harlow, whose discerning eye has shaped contemporary art for 3 decades, will select one piece from our showcase for his upcoming exhibition. The crowd murmured with excitement. Artists straightened, eyes bright with hope and anxiety. Victor stepped forward. Thank you, Eliza. As always, the Whitmore provides a stunning array of talent. He began moving methodically through the displayed works, occasionally making notes or asking questions. Mira delivered the Jacobson sculpture to its designated pedestal, then moved quietly toward an empty wall space near the back of the room. With quick, practiced movements, the same ones she used when hanging exhibitions, she secured her canvas to the wall and removed the cloth. The painting seemed to breathe in the gallery light. Unlike the abstracts and conceptual pieces dominating, the showcase Mira's work was a portrait, but one that defied simple classification. A woman's face emerged from darkness, rendered with hyper-realistic detail that captured every line and pore. Yet the background dissolved into expressive brushwork, colors bleeding into one another with emotional intensity. The subject's eyes reflected the technique Mira had perfected over years, a method of layering translucent oils to create depth that seemed almost 3-dimensional. It was neither fully classical nor contemporary, but something that existed in the space between, just as Mira herself had existed in the spaces between artist and worker, visible and invisible. She stepped back, heart hammering, and waited. The first person to notice was a collector known for his conservative tastes. He stopped mid-conversation, wineglass halfway to his lips, and stared. "Whose is that?" he asked, no one in particular pointing. Others turned. Conversations halted. Even Victor Harlow, discussing a sculpture with Eliza, glanced over with professional disinterest that quickly transformed into focused attention. "That wasn't there before," Douglas said, frowning. "Who hung that?" Victor was already moving toward the painting, the crowd parting before him. He stood before it, utterly still, for a full minute. The gallery fell silent. "Who is the artist?" he finally asked. Mira's throat constricted. The moment stretched, taut with possibility. "I am," she said, her voice stronger than expected. Eyes turned toward her, the maintenance worker in a simple black dress. Douglas laughed, the sound cutting through the tension. "Come on, Chen. Where did this really come from?" "I painted it," she repeated, "over the past 3 years." Eliza stepped forward, lips thinned with displeasure. "Mira, this is highly inappropriate. If you wanted to submit work, there are proper channels." "I'd like to hear more," Victor interrupted. He hadn't taken his eyes off the painting. "The technique here. I haven't seen this approach to glazing in contemporary work. It's reminiscent of Rembrandt's later methods, but with distinctive modifications." Mira nodded. "I studied his self-portraits, the way he built up thin layers of oil with transparent glazes between. But I found that adding a suspension medium to the glazes allowed for more controlled luminosity." Victor turned to her, eyebrows raised. "And the background treatment? That's clearly influenced by abstract expressionism, but there's something else there." "I wanted to contrast technical precision with emotional expression," Mira explained, warming to the subject she'd never been able to discuss. "The figure emerges from chaos, but remains connected to it. I used palette knives for the background, texture, then partially dissolved the edges with turpentine washes." The gallery remained silent, collective disbelief hanging in the air. Douglas cleared his throat. "This is absurd. She's our janitor, for God's sake." "Maintenance supervisor," Mira corrected quietly. "Whatever your title," Victor said. "You've created something extraordinary." He gestured toward the painting. "The emotional intelligence here combined with technical virtuosity. It's rare to find both in equal measure." Rita Gallo pushed through the crowd. "I told you not to show it tonight," she whispered fiercely. "I was trying to help." "I'm sorry," Mira replied. "I couldn't wait anymore." Victor turned to Eliza. "I believe I've found my selection for next month's exhibition." Douglas stepped forward. "Now wait a minute, there are established artists here who've been waiting for this opportunity. You can't possibly—" "I most certainly can," Victor cut him off. "And I believe Miss Chen and I have business to discuss." He extended his hand to Mira. "Would you join me? I have questions about your training." Mira hesitated. "I'm self-taught, mostly. I've spent lunch breaks studying the works here. And after hours—" "You practiced," Victor finished for her. "For how long?" "Since before I worked here. But I didn't have money for supplies, so I cleaned this gallery to be near the art. To learn." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Eliza's face had gone pale. Douglas looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. 15 years, Mira continued, finding her voice growing stronger. "I've been painting for 15 years while everyone in this room looked right through me." Victor nodded slowly. "And now, Ms. Chen, I believe everyone sees you quite clearly." The crowd began to move, circling her painting with new interest. Critics who had ignored her minutes before now analyzed her brushwork. Collectors whispered among themselves. Through it all, Mira stood rooted to the spot, caught between vindication and vertigo. "Ms. Chen," Victor said quietly, drawing her slightly away from the crowd. "I'd like to represent you." Mira's breath caught. "I have other works." "I suspected. As much. Talent like yours isn't born from a single canvas." A waiter approached, offering champagne. Mira accepted a glass with hands that trembled slightly. Across the room, she caught Eliza's gaze, a mixture of shock, reassessment, and something like respect. "To visibility," Victor said, raising his glass. Mira smiled. "To being seen." 3 months later, Mira stood in Victor Harlow's gallery, surrounded by her work. 15 paintings representing 15 years of invisible labor and hidden passion. Each canvas told part of her story, from early experimental pieces to her most recent work. The exhibition, titled Hidden in Plain Sight, had received glowing reviews. Art journals featured interviews where Mira discussed her unusual journey. Collectors competed for her paintings, with prices quickly reaching sums. That still seemed unreal to her. She had given notice at the Whitmore Gallery the day after the showcase. Eliza had tried to convince her to stay, even offering studio space above the gallery. "You could be our resident artist," she'd suggested. "It would be wonderful publicity." Mira had declined politely. "I spent too long being invisible here." Now, on the final day of her exhibition, Mira watched as visitors engaged with her work. She wore a paint-splattered smock over designer clothes she was still getting used to. Her hands, once raw from cleaning solutions, now bore calluses of a different kind. Rita Gallo appeared beside her. "I knew you'd be a sensation." "Thank you for trying to help that night," Mira said, "even if I didn't listen." Rita laughed. "Sometimes the wrong moment becomes exactly right. I've been meaning to ask, what will you do now?" Mira considered the question. Job offers had come from universities and private collectors. Museums had requested commissioned works. "I'm starting a program," she said finally, "for custodial and service workers at museums and galleries. Art classes, materials, mentorship, seeking out more hidden talents, making sure they don't stay hidden." As visitors filtered out at closing time, Mira found herself alone with her work. She approached her centerpiece, the portrait that had changed everything. The woman in the painting stared back at her, emerging from darkness into light, finally seen. Art, Mira had learned, wasn't just about technique or talent. It was about the courage to be visible in a world determined to look past you. The greatest masterpieces were worthless if kept wrapped and hidden away, just as the greatest potential remained unrealized until given space to breathe. She reached out, touching the dried paint of her signature. Talent could hide in the shadows for years, but eventually light finds its way in, and what was once invisible becomes impossible to overlook.